I never thought I would find myself caught in the middle of someone else's past love story, but that's exactly where I ended up. My name is Erin, and for as long as I can remember, my closest friend has been Jason. We grew up together, played basketball in high school, and even shared a small apartment when money was tight in college. Through every mistake and victory, Jason was always there. But one part of his life always seemed a little untouchable: his ex-girlfriend, Clara. Everyone in our circle knew about Clara. She wasn't just another name in Jason's long list of flings. She was the one who had left a scar. Their relationship had been passionate, fiery, and ultimately explosive. Jason never spoke much about what went wrong, only that it had ended badly. But even years later, when her name came up, I could see a shadow cross his expression. I first met Clara at a party Jason had dragged me to. She was standing by the kitchen counter, laughing at something one of her friends said. Her laughter wasn't loud or forced. It had that rare quality of making everyone else pause to listen. She had a calm energy about her, but her eyes carried a spark that felt dangerous, like a fire that could easily burn if you got too close. I remember Jason whispering to me, "Don't even think about it, she's poison." He was half joking, half serious, and I nodded because back then it didn't matter. I had my own life, my own relationships, and Clara was just someone in Jason's past. Years passed, and I settled down with someone who seemed right for me. Her name was Emily. Steady, kind, reliable. She wasn't the kind of person who made the room pause when she entered, but she made life feel stable, and that was what I thought I wanted. Jason eventually moved on as well, though I could always sense that a part of him never really let Clara go. Then one night, everything changed. It was a Friday evening, and Jason had invited a small group of friends over to celebrate his promotion. I went with Emily, expecting a typical night of laughter, drinks, and casual conversations. But when I walked into Jason's apartment, I froze. Clara was there. She looked different from how I remembered. Older, yes, but also sharper, more polished. Her hair was tied back, her dress simple yet elegant, and the spark in her eyes seemed even more dangerous than before. She caught my gaze across the room, and for a second, the noise around us faded. I tried to shake it off. Emily was at my side. Jason was in high spirits, and the last thing I wanted was to get tangled up in old ghosts that weren't mine. But as the night went on, Clara and I found ourselves in the same conversations again and again. She asked me about work, about my life, about Emily, and though her questions were casual, there was something behind them, an attentiveness that felt heavier than it should have done at one point. Jason disappeared to take a phone call, and Emily was chatting with another guest. That left Clara and me standing near the balcony, looking out at the city lights. "You've changed," she said softly, her voice almost lost in the hum of conversation behind us. I laughed nervously. "It's been years. We've all changed." "No," she replied, her eyes lingering on me. "Not like that. You carry yourself differently now. More certain, more dangerous." Dangerous. The word hung in the air between us. I didn't know what she meant, but my pulse quickened. I should have stepped away, should have excused myself, but I didn't. Instead, I stayed there, caught in a silence that felt far too intimate for two people who were supposed to have no connection. Emily called my name from across the room, and the moment broke. I excused myself, pretending it was nothing, but deep down, I knew it wasn't. That one exchange had left a mark. The rest of the night went on, but my attention was divided. Even when Emily held my hand, even when Jason laughed loudly with his. New colleagues, a part of me kept drifting back to Clara, her words, her gaze, that spark of something forbidden. When we finally left, Emily fell asleep in the car, her head resting on my shoulder. I should have felt content, should have felt lucky to have someone so steady by my side. But instead, my mind kept replaying Clara's voice, that dangerous tone, and the way she had looked at me as if she saw something no one else had. That was the beginning. I didn't know it yet, but that night had set everything in motion. What started as a casual encounter would soon spiral into something I couldn't control. And as much as I wanted to deny it, part of me didn't want to stop. It either asterisk the following week, I tried to push the memory of Clara out of my mind. I buried myself in work, spent evenings with Emily, and even joined Jason for a game of basketball on Saturday. On the surface, life looked the same, but inside I knew something had shifted. That one glance across the balcony, those words she whispered, more dangerous, they clung to me in a way I couldn't shake. I told myself it was nothing, that Clara had only been curious, maybe even playing a harmless game of teasing. But deep down, I knew better. And when Jason invited us to another gathering, this time a smaller dinner with just a handful of close friends, I had a feeling Clara would be there, and she was. Jason's apartment was quieter this time. Just 6 of us sitting around the dining table, candles flickering between plates of food. Clara arrived late, slipping in with that same calm confidence, as if she owned the space the moment she stepped inside. She greeted Jason first, then Emily, and finally me. Her eyes lingered on mine for a second too long, a silent acknowledgement. Of the unspoken tension hanging between us throughout dinner, I tried to avoid her gaze. I focused on Jason's stories, on Emily's laughter, on the taste of the food. But every now and then, I felt Clara's eyes on me, pulling me back, making it harder to pretend when the meal was over. Jason suggested a quick walk around the block. Everyone agreed, though Emily excused herself, saying she was too tired and wanted to stay back. Jason left his keys with her, and soon enough, we were outside in the cool evening air. The group split naturally into pairs, Jason with another friend, Clara and I slightly behind them. At first, we walked in silence, the sound of our footsteps echoing against the quiet street. Then Clara spoke. "You didn't call," she said softly, almost accusingly. "Why would I?" I replied, my voice a little too sharp. "We barely talked." She smiled faintly. Barely was enough. I didn't know what to say. The honesty of her words cut through my defenses. I wanted to argue, to remind her of Jason, of Emily, of all the reasons this shouldn't even be a conversation. But instead, I stayed quiet, and that silence said more than I wanted it to. By the time we circled back to Jason's apartment, my chest felt heavy. Inside, Emily was already curled up on the couch, scrolling through her phone. Clara slipped away into the kitchen, and I followed without thinking. She stood by the sink, pouring herself a glass of water. When she turned, her eyes met mine, steady and unflinching. "You feel it too," she whispered. It wasn't a question. I froze. My instinct was to deny it, to laugh it off, but the truth hung too close to the surface. I did feel it, the pull, the danger, the sense that stepping any closer would ruin everything. And yet, I didn't move away. Before I could answer, Jason called from the living room, breaking the moment. Clara set her glass down, her lips curving into the faintest smile. Then she brushed past me, her shoulder grazing mine as if by accident, though I knew better. That small touch sent a rush through me I couldn't ignore. The night ended soon after. Emily and I drove home in silence, her head leaning against the window, mine spinning with thoughts I didn't dare voice. I knew I should have felt guilty, should have felt angry at myself for even entertaining Clara's presence. But instead, all I felt was restless anticipation. Days later, the inevitable happened. Clara texted me, "Coffee? Just us, no games, no expectations. I just want to talk." I stared at the message for a long time, torn between reason and desire. Meeting her would cross a line, even if it was just coffee. But the truth was, I had already crossed it in my mind the moment I saved her number. I didn't tell Emily. I didn't tell Jason. I simply replied, "Where?" We met at a small cafe tucked away from the main streets, a place where no one was likely to recognize us. She was already there when I arrived, sitting at a corner table with her hands wrapped around a steaming mug dot. The moment I sat down, she leaned in. "I knew you'd come." I wanted to protest, to tell her she was wrong, that this meant nothing. But the look in her eyes made it impossible. She had seen something in me I hadn't admitted to myself, and now it was too late to hide it. We talked for hours about life, about choices, about regrets. But beneath every word, the tension hummed, unspoken yet undeniable. By the time I left, I knew this wasn't the end. Meeting her had only deepened the pull, and the longer I resisted, the stronger it seemed to grow. Walking back to my car, I realized something terrifying. I wasn't sure if I even wanted to resist anymore. I told myself it was only coffee, but lies have a way of multiplying. One meeting turned into 2, then 3. Each time Clara and I met, the line blurred a little more, and the excuses I gave Emily became easier to say: working late, helping Jason, just tired. She trusted me, and every time her eyes softened with belief, the guilt dug deeper. Yet no amount of guilt stopped me from answering Clara's calls. There was something intoxicating about her presence, a mix of danger and comfort I couldn't find anywhere else. She understood me in ways Emily never tried to. When she laughed, when she leaned closer during our conversations, I felt alive in a way I hadn't in years. But secrets are heavy, and they never stay buried for long. One evening, Clara asked me to walk her home. We strolled along quiet streets, the city lights flickering around us. At her doorstep, she paused and looked at me with an intensity that made my chest tighten. "You know, this isn't just about the past, right?" She whispered, "This isn't about Jason anymore. It's about us." Her words hit me harder than I expected. For weeks, I had justified everything by telling myself it was harmless, that it was curiosity, that it was leftover sparks from her and Jason. But in that moment, staring into her eyes, I realized it wasn't. This was something real, something growing between us, and something that would destroy everything else if I let it. I left quickly that night, but her words stayed with me. At home, Emily was curled on the couch, waiting. She smiled when I walked in, asked if I'd eaten, and reached for my hand. I answered her, sat with her, pretended nothing was wrong. But inside, I knew I was living a double life. The breaking point came sooner than I expected. Jason called me one Saturday morning, asking if I could help him move some things into storage. I agreed, partly out of habit, partly out of guilt. But when I arrived at his apartment, Clara was there too. The air was thick the moment I stepped inside. Jason greeted me cheerfully, oblivious, while Clara's eyes met mine across the room. It was only a second, but it carried every secret, every meeting, every stolen moment. My heart pounded, terrified that Jason would notice, that Emily would somehow find out, that the fragile walls I built would collapse right there. We spent the afternoon hauling boxes, pretending nothing was wrong. But when Jason left briefly to grab lunch, Clara and I were alone in the apartment. She moved closer, her voice low. "How much longer can you pretend?" she asked. I didn't answer. My silence was enough. Jason returned moments later, and the world snapped back into its rhythm. But the damage was done. The tension was no longer hidden, and I realized how reckless we had become. That night, I couldn't sleep. Emily lay peacefully beside me, trusting, innocent, and I hated myself for betraying her. Yet when my phone buzzed with Clara's name, I didn't ignore it. "Come over." I knew I should say no. I knew that crossing that line would mean losing everything: Emily's trust, Jason's friendship, even my own self-respect. But temptation is a quiet thief. And by the time I realized it, I was already out the door. What happened after wasn't the kind of story you tell out loud. It wasn't loud or cinematic. It was quiet, heavy, filled with the kind of choices that carve scars you can't erase. When I finally returned home, Emily stirred awake and smiled sleepily at me, asking if I was okay. I nodded, kissed her forehead, and lied through my teeth. Days passed, but the guilt only grew. Clara and I had crossed the line, and there's no going back. Every conversation with Jason felt like walking on glass. Every glance from Emily felt like a knife. I had what I thought I wanted, but it didn't feel like freedom. It felt like chains. The final blow came one evening when Jason showed up unannounced. Emily let him in, smiling warmly, while my heart sank. He didn't say much at first, just sat across from me, his expression unreadable. Then slowly, he leaned forward. "I don't know what's going on between you and Clara," he said quietly, "but I can see it. And if you value anything we've built, you'll stop." His words were calm, but they cut deeper than any anger could. He didn't need proof. He didn't need to shout. He had seen enough, and the disappointment in his eyes told me I had already lost him. When he left, Emily asked what that was about. I told her it was nothing, another lie stacked on the pile. But as I watched her smile fade, some part of me knew the truth would come out eventually. Secrets like this don't stay hidden forever. And as I sat there, staring at the woman who trusted me and thinking of the friend who had always been like a brother, I realized the cruelest part of it all. I had wanted everything, and in the end, I was going to lose it all.